Long stormy winter, staying here tonight.
Howdy ha, Shindiggers. My name is Steve Holroyd. By my side, as always, is Sammy the Wonder Pug, and you are listening to The Front Row, the second best way to spend 15 minutes of your day. Last time out, we talked about the soccer war, that battle in 1928 and 1929 between what was then known as the United States Football Association and the American Soccer League over who was going to control soccer in the United States. And we hinted that there was another soccer war on the horizon. Today we're going to talk about that brewing storm, as well as the arena in which it will likely be fought, which is federal antitrust law. And of course, because this is a soccer history podcast, we will also once again point out that there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to American soccer, and that this has all sort of happened before. So let's talk first about why this storm is brewing. About a year ago, U.S. Soccer proposed changes to its Division I standards for professional soccer leagues. Among other things, these proposals will require any D1 league to have at least 16 teams, up from the current requirement of 12, and that 75% of those teams be based in cities with more than 2 million people, up from the current requirement of 1 million. On its face, these changes might seem rather innocuous. However, let's add another fact. These proposed changes were made at a time when the current incarnation of the North American Soccer League had a petition pending seeking D1 status. And it doesn't take a genius to conclude that changing the rules midstream while a petition is pending is kind of dirty pool. And so in no time at all, the North American Soccer League lawyered up and started saying the word that makes sports leagues tremble, and that is antitrust. So let's talk a little bit about antitrust. First, antitrust is a term of art that refers to seminal legislation that was passed at the turn of the 20th century, designed to lower prices and help the consumer by breaking up monopolies that essentially controlled entire marketplaces and as a result could engage in price fixing and also make sure there was never any competition. Sports leagues have always been sensitive to antitrust issues because at their essence they themselves are monopolies. I mean, currently the NFL, NHL, they have a monopoly on professional major league sport. Being a monopoly is not in and of itself unlawful, but they always have to be mindful of not going too far and taking action that even eliminates the possibility of a rival league. Baseball, because of a widely criticized Supreme Court decision from the 1920s, enjoys an antitrust exemption. However, the other leagues don't. And why do they fear antitrust so much? Well, violation of antitrust laws can result in treble damages against the perpetrators. Now, American soccer, as we talked about last time, poses some unique challenges for both the antitrust lawyer and anyone who wants to start a new league. In soccer, you simply cannot start a new league. Rather, you have to go on bended knee and seek sanctioning from U.S. Soccer, whose authority in turn derives from FIFA. And there are consequences if you operate without that sanctioning. You are a branded and outlaw league, which means your teams can't participate in FIFA-sanctioned events, such as the CONCACAF Champions League, and your players risk being banned from FIFA-sanctioned events like the World Cup. Now, as we said last time, what's past is prologue. Back in the 1960s, during the American sports explosion, where new leagues and expansion were happening on almost a yearly basis, a group of individuals decided that the next big thing would be professional soccer, and decided they wanted to form not one, not two, but 3 professional sports leagues. All 3 realized they would need sanctioning from the USSF, at the time known as the United States Soccer Football Association. And the USSF, for its part, said, 3 leagues where we don't have any right now, any major professional, that is, right now, that's crazy, come back, merge. But, again, as we've seen in the past, men of means don't like being told what to do, so they said, no, it's impossible, you have to pick one. And ultimately, the USSF selected a group going by the name the North American Soccer League, in no small part because the NASL was the only circuit willing to pay tribute to the USSFA in the form of $25,000 franchise fees, 10% of the television revenue, and 4% of ticket sales. Well, with that, the other two groups did what was previously deemed impossible. They merged. They formed the National Professional Soccer League and announced they would go ahead in 1967 and begin play even as an outlaw league. And indeed scored a major coup by obtaining a 10-year television contract from CBS. And FIFA-sanctioned entities started rattling their sword, making all kinds of threats. For instance, the English FA sent letters to all of its clubs warning that the players who went to the NPSL could face permanent suspension, but nevertheless the NPSL soldiered onward. Now, the North American Soccer League was not willing to give the NPSL the soccer market all to itself in 1967, and as a result changed its plans. It initially planned on starting play in 1968. Instead, it moved up its table to 1967. It decided to enjoy one of the benefits of being sanctioned, and it brought over entire teams to represent cities in the league. It also rechristened itself from the North American Soccer League to the United Soccer Association, deciding, I guess, that acronym was a little more marketable. So in 1967, two major soccer leagues existed where none had previously. As you might expect, it was a disaster. Both leagues did not meet their mark as far as attendance expectations. With the competition, player salaries were driven up a little bit because, as we saw in the 1920s, players who were willing to play for an outlaw league were able to command slightly higher salaries for the privilege, so to speak, of playing in an outlaw league, and both sides saw pretty quickly they were losing money. Both sides began discussing a merger, but the USA, the league, not the country, was not being particularly reasonable. And so on September 9, 1967, the NPSL filed an $18 million antitrust lawsuit in federal court against FIFA, the USSF, and the United Soccer Association. It included even the Canadian Soccer Association because they were Canadian leagues and teams in both leagues. The suit alleged that in violation of federal antitrust laws, the defendants have engaged in a conspiracy to drive the NPSL out of soccer by, among other things, making a contract giving the United Soccer Association exclusive control for 10 years over who may operate pro soccer teams in the United States. The lawsuit sought treble damages and an injunction prohibiting the United Soccer Association from operating until such time as the NPSL and its members were granted recognition. Treble damages means that the $18 million pled in the complaint could turn into $54 million if the NPSL were successful, or approximately $1.5 million in today's money. Well, as it turns out, neither league was making money. It wasn't like the USA, the league, was sitting on a gold mine that it absolutely had to protect. And so, given the amount of damages at stake and, of course, the uncertainties of litigation, ultimately peace broke out, and a merger was announced on December 7, 1967, with the new circuit christened the North American Soccer League. So as a result of the settlement, parties did not get to find out whether federal antitrust law would prohibit the whole FIFA sanctioning arrangement. And the question remains unanswered to this day. There was another attempt in 1969 by the California Clippers, an NASL team that left the league and tried to operate independently, but that also settled. And in 2006, Champions World, a group that hosted tournaments involving top foreign teams, giving them a chance to participate in a mini tournament, filed suit against U.S. Soccer and MLS, alleging that the former's extortionist demands of Champions World to sanction its tournaments was designed to drive Champions World out of business, paving the way for MLS to copy the World Series of Soccer model that Champions World was trying to push. Once again, U.S. Soccer had to defend a practice that, at first blush, this whole sanctioning thing does appear to be a naked attempt to control the soccer marketplace. However, this time, in 2006, it had a defense that did not exist in 1967 and 1969. Specifically, in 1978, Congress passed the Amateur Sports Act, establishing a vertical structure for Olympic sports in the United States. And the USSF, besides being in control of professional soccer, was also the overseer of amateur soccer in the United States, and as a result of that, it was covered in the act. So U.S. Soccer claimed, in defense of the Champions World suit, that the Amateur Sports Act also gave it total control over professional soccer as well. In other words, Congress sanctioned USSF and by extension FIFA and made them the sole controllers of professional soccer. Tellingly, the judge in the Champions World lawsuit rejected that notion as being a bridge too far. However, he didn't actually rule that U.S. Soccer was operating in a manner that violated antitrust law, because the suit wound up getting balanced because Champions World had also proceeded to arbitration under FIFA procedures, so there was some what we call res judicata, collateral estoppel type of issues. You don't get to try the same case twice in different forms. And ultimately, the court concluded there was no antitrust violations. Similarly, when antitrust reared its head as part of the Robin Fraser lawsuit, the players against MLS, again, the court found there was no antitrust, not so much ruling on whether or not the whole sanctioning process was lawful, but just pointing out, well, as far as places for players to play, there was competition. So the long and short of it is, we still really don't have any signpost that's going to indicate whether any subsequent antitrust lawsuit by the North American Soccer League, the current version, will be successful. What we do know, though, is that soccer wars are divisive. Soccer wars do not help the sport, and soccer wars ultimately result in both sides losing at some point. So hopefully all this can be avoided. But until then, all we can do is stand by and watch. As things develop, we of course will keep you posted. But until then, we will happily return to more traditional American soccer history topics next time out. Until then, this is Steve Holroyd with Sammy the Wonder Pug, reminding you to go on iTunes and give us ratings and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter at Section 107 Row A, and you can always send comments and suggestions to us via email, soccermaven, that's soccermavn, at yahoo.com. So until next time, this is Steve and Sammy reminding you, keep your feet on the ground, and you won't get yellow carded for studs up tackles. See you.